the phone right up to the mic.
No, we got to figure it out a different way. Just
Oh, all right.
The Fantasy Six Pack Hour with your hosts, Joe Bond
You're awful.
and AJ Applegarth.
It's Sin Shu Chu. It's a mouthful.
all right. Welcome to the Fantasy Six Pack Hour podcast. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, as always, my co-host AJ Applegarth. What's up, bro?
What's happening? What's happening?
Got a late start as usual, I guess. No big deal. We'll make it work. We're just going to start making this a 9:30 start time, I guess. We'll make it work, AJ. Just for you. But
Whatever. Whatever you want to do.
all
You
right,
can always
man.
start, and then I'll just, come on late and then talk for an extra half hour after you sign off. I mean, might not record, but I'll be entertained.
Fair enough. All right, well, we got the NFC South preview tonight. Before we jump into that, we got a lot to talk about. It seems like a lot of news here. Start with some baseball, man. We've got positive tests coming out in baseball. This past weekend, the Marlins kind of exploded, made headlines. Bunch of positive tests there. Games have been canceled. Phillies canceled games because that's who they were playing. The Yankees didn't want to travel there, obviously. Orioles canceled games because they weren't going to Miami and said, nope, hell no, and I don't blame them. So
Me neither.
I don't know, man. Like, I know we've asked this question before, but now that we're seeing this kind of these test cases come positive more and more and more like this, I mean, how likely is it that we're getting the season in? What do you think?
Baseball season, I would give it a 75% chance of not finishing.
Not finishing. All right. That's kind of where I think I would be. So it's not going to be. It's going to be tough, man. Like, I don't think Miami's going to be the only team that's going to have all these test cases pop up like this. So, it's going to be a matter of like how many times can they cancel games before they can't get a season in and have enough teams play the equal amount of games and things like that, and just safety of the players. I don't know. It's something to watch. I'm still chugging away on the baseball content for the site as everybody else is. So, read it while you can, guys. I guess enjoy baseball while we can. It is fun to watch. I will say it is. It does seem even though it's weird to watch it with no fans and weird cardboard faces in the stands. It's at least baseball, so something for us to talk about. Over to football, we've got some opt-outs happening, and the deadline for this, I think, is August 1st. So we're going to have some more in the next couple of days. We record on the 30th. So, we've got a few players opting out. The two big ones, the biggest one dropped today, but I'll start with Devin Funchess. Not huge, but, I mean, Green Bay did sign him. They didn't bring in any other wide receivers, so you had to think there was going to be a role there for him. How much is this going to impact? I mean, I think Adam's stock just goes up ever so slightly because of this. But, I mean, is there anybody else that you see as a clear winner there because Funchess is out?
I mean, I think Lazard was probably looked at as the number 2 anyways, even with Funchess coming in. I mean, he's had one season that's worth a shit. So I don't know why he was out of all these fantastic, talented rookies that they looked at it and said, hey, you know what? Let's go get Devin Funchess. We don't need these rookies. Let's get a backup quarterback who's not going to play this year and just piss Aaron Rodgers off. Let's do all these other things that we shouldn't do instead of getting a receiver. Oh shit, we still need a receiver. Yeah, I'm not surprised by it, because of the circumstances, and that's fine and all, but I like Lazard to benefit from this. I mean, really everybody in that receiver room is going to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It was definitely an odd off season for them. I did read something where and I don't remember the source. I just saw the headline where Rodgers actually thinks that Lazard or not Lazard, the quarterback Love is actually going to play. Like they want him to play this year, and I wonder how much there is. I didn't read the article, like I said. I kind of caught it on my phone, just scrolling through Twitter. So it was just interesting to see that though, that he thinks that actually is a possibility. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't really believe it. I don't think he was polished enough to. So
was he foreshadowing that he's going to opt out and then leave the team with Jordan Love as the main quarterback?
That would be
the ultimate
sort of
revenge FU.
A little bit. I sort of would laugh at that. I would cry if I was an Adams owner, and I'm not yet. I'm hoping I will be. But I did draft Aaron Jones in Raz Bowl, so that would suck.
Yeah.
So hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, the other big name, offensive wise, fantasy skill player wise, here is Damian Williams opted out today. So you hate to see it, but you knew it was coming as soon as it happened. All the people that were, backing Clyde Edwards-Helaire, taking victory laps on Twitter. It's like, this isn't why you thought it was going to happen, but okay, you can. I know it sucks. People but obviously Hilaire's value just skyrockets immediately. I'm trying to figure out who else benefits, if it's going to be, they go get somebody else, or if it's going to be Darwin Thompson. I think it could just be all slew of guys there. I don't know if there's really anybody behind him that I'm totally counting on being a number 2 threat there. And it's going to suck because we're not going to get preseason to really see who's going to get it. We're going to get very little reports out of camp, and that's all we're going to have. So I don't know. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously, again, it's a tough situation for the team because now they're without, I guess, their starting back, or who should have been their starter coming into it. Everything that I was looking at was saying how they were going to bring CEH along kind of slow, and they didn't have to rush him into it. So now they're potentially looking at doing that. I mean, they do still have Washington. They've got, Thompson, who you mentioned. They still have people out in free agency who they could maybe look at bringing back. Shady. I don't know how much he's
Tampa, so that's not happening.
Okay, well, never mind then. Yeah, I didn't say that. Yeah, so I think they're going to look at all the options, but there's plenty of backs there, so I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, and there's been sorry, what?
I'm good.
I thought you were gonna say something else. The other big name. There's a whole bunch of other guys, but one of the other big names, like New England, lost a lot of players, which is interesting because they cleared like $22 million in cap space or something like that. They lost Donta Hightower, Patrick Chung. What's the other one? Yes, thank you, Brandon Bolden. So yeah, there's been some guys there, so that's interesting. You wonder if they're just not going to compete this year and go for a high draft pick, or if they're going to go out and sign one of these big name free agents that's sitting out there. Another guy here for the Giants, Nate Soldier, starting left tackle. That's big for everybody, really. That's going to hurt Saquon slightly. That's going to hurt Daniel Jones. Everybody. So just. Keep an eye out for these opt-outs is pretty much all we can say. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of articles across different sites, analyzing the impacts of them. We'll try to do one too. It's just an ever-changing world with all the coronavirus COVID stuff. So you gotta stay on your toes. All right, man. Let's do our beer of the week.
Beer.
All right, so I am doing today an Other Half Green City Double Dry Hopped IPA, 7%. I believe I gave this one a 4. I've got a couple other half beers that I've tasted before, and this one's up there. but there's been better. I do like this one though. It's it's lighter, but it's still got plenty of flavor behind it too, which makes it good. So it's, even though it's a 7%er, it doesn't like hit you hard. So what you got?
Salad. Well, I went down to the Downtown Crown, as you know, today, and picked up a little bit too much beer that I care to talk about. But tonight I'm starting off with the Black Flag Brewing Company's 4th anniversary DIPA. It's at 8.2%er, and haven't tried it yet, so we'll see what it is. It's I want to say a New England. No, maybe not.
All right,
good. Solid.
Cool.
Very good. Wow.
All right, well, we had a little bit longer of an intro than we have the past few weeks, but I'm excited to get to our guest this week from The Score, the #1 in-season ranker on Fantasy Pros last season, Justin Boone. What's up, man? You there?
I am here. I feel like a caged animal. You guys have just had me in here for like 5 minutes, just raring to go, and now I'm getting unleashed.
Good, man. Bring all that energy.
Awesome.
So we just did our beer of the week. You drinking anything with us tonight, man?
I am. Now, we talked earlier and you said bring a beer, and I am actually out of beer at the moment, but it's okay because I'm not as much of a beer drinker. I still will socially, but I much prefer bourbon. And so we're going with Blanton's tonight.
Nice.
Got the nice little horse top there. Blanton's is one of my favorites for sure, and putting it in the old trusty Bill's mug, which is normally water, but tonight we're going with bourbon.
Nice.
Good.
Blanton's is solid, definitely.
Yeah, we don't discriminate alcohol here, so we're good.
Good stuff.
All right, so NFC South, that's what we brought you on to talk about, man. So how it's going to break down here is we'll run through positions. I'll rattle off the ADP of the primary guys here, and then we go through some questions, highlighting a few players. First, though, we're going to start with just kind of an overall division question. And obviously, you got to lead with Tom Brady, the signing in Tampa. Big news in a lot of people's minds, makes them an immediate contender. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean, with the weapons there, the big thing, though, is everybody's going to focus on Brady and Gronk and all that stuff. The big thing is that defense. If you look back to last year, their defense was getting a lot better, and that's got to factor in. So they're not the best team in the division. That's the Saints, and I think the Saints at this point, might be the Super Bowl favorite, or at least they're right up there with the Chiefs and a couple other teams. But Brady's going to make it interesting being on the Bucs, and man, the offenses in this division. I'm so glad that this is the one you asked me to do, because the offenses here, the fantasy production, it's unbelievable in the NFC South.
Yeah, I was doing these questions just going, man, this is going to be a fun one. It's one of the more fun divisions to talk about for sure, if not the most fun. Yeah, I agree. Tampa's going to be a very interesting team to watch. I think they do. I think they are one of the top 5 teams that are contenders easily. And yeah, you mentioned how the defense got better, but even without just being better in general, I think with Tom Brady there, not putting them on the field as often is just going to make them so much better. So that will be that will be something to watch out for too. I mean, just the efficiency of the defense and having them, rested will make a huge difference. So, all right, well, let's jump into the quarterbacks here. Rattle off the ADP here. So we got Matt Ryan at 8, Drew Brees at 9, Tom Brady at 11, and then Teddy Bridgewater all the way down at 27. Start off here with Drew Brees. So, great quarterback. Nobody's denying that. Probably, easy Hall of Famer. In my opinion, though, he's not going to rack up the yardage or the touchdowns that, these top guys in fantasy are going to get at the end of the year. He's going to have some boom weeks for sure. But he's a good, reliable quarterback. I mean, with that being said, is he really worth the QB9 draft cost?
I don't have him ranked there, but it's not far off. I got him at QB 11. I think at this point in his career, yeah, he's just not the elite top 5 option. Now, I don't know that I totally agree with you that it's because of the yardage and the touchdowns, though. I think the problem with a lot of these guys, and it's going to plague pretty much every quarterback in this division, is the rushing numbers just aren't there for any of these guys. And to be in the top 10, it is very hard to get in there without putting up 200, 250 or more rushing yards on the season, right? You even see that from Mahomes. And now you see a guy like Aaron Rodgers, for example, who didn't really do it last year. I think he was at 183 rushing yards, and it's getting harder for him to get up there. So when you look at Brees, like you're talking about the yardage and the touchdowns not being there, if you look at, he played 11 games last year. And if you extrapolate his numbers over a full 16, right, you look at that, you would have had over 4,300 rushing yards, which would have put him sixth in the league passing yards, which would have put him sixth in the league. You look at touchdowns, he actually would have put up 39 touchdowns on the year had he played a full 16-game season at the pace that he was going at. That would have led the league. So it's interesting that he can still, he can still get it done. Absolutely. If you look even a little bit closer, you drill down on some of his numbers. He threw for 3 or more touchdowns in 7 of his 11 games last year. We know for fantasy, that's fantastic. Those multi-score games, especially 3 touchdown games, right? So he threw for 3 or more touchdowns on 64% of his games. I'm not trying to beat up on Aaron Rodgers here, but that's something that Rodgers only did 3 times last year. And Rodgers played all 16, and that's like 19, 20% of his games. So Brees definitely can still get it done. You're giving him more weapons now, with Emmanuel Sanders showing up, right, which gives them a legit number 2 now to add to a healthier Alvin Kamara. Kamara was still good, did his usual. He caught, he would have been on pace for 81 catches last year, which is his total usual thing, right? But he still has Michael Thomas. You have Jared Cook there. There's a lot of weapons in that passing game for Brees to get it done. It's a team that's going to win a lot of games. I still like Brees, but like you're saying, it's just you have to change your view on him. He is not the top 5 guy. And part of it is because how deep the quarterback position is now, right? When you look at those guys near the top and somebody like Josh Allen, who is nowhere near the quarterback Drew Brees is, but he gets that rushing production and it vaults him up the rankings. Somebody like Carson Wentz, who 2 years ago, the rushing numbers went down when he was coming off the knee injury. And then last year they came back again. And he was the quarterback 9, despite having basically no one in his receiving core. So it's just tough for these older quarterbacks to get it done. And I don't want to spoil the rest of them because we're going to talk about all the quarterbacks in this division. But it's going to be a common theme that we're going to bring up here. So I'm totally willing to take Brees where he is going. But he just doesn't have the ceiling that some of those other guys have.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking at the numbers – and I phrased this question. I looked back at the couple of years before that. Like last year to me was kind of an outlier a little bit. Like 1, he got hurt. 2, when he was healthy, he was gunning for that record for Michael Thomas. So like and Kamara was banged up, and we'll get to that. So like there was some factors in play where I feel like his numbers were a little. I mean, you think about it. He threw for more touchdowns last year than he did in 2017 in 5 less games. I mean, something it just wasn't right. And yeah, I mean, his pace last year was incredible considering the number of games played. I'm just not sure that's going to happen again. I like the weapons around him, but I think if Kamara can stay healthy, then I think they do kind of back off of him a little bit more to keep him healthy. You don't want him standing back there and just getting drilled at 38 years old or 40 whatever 41. Jeez,
41. Yeah, what is
like? I don't know, man.
Cool. Are we talking about Matt Ryan? Because he's not that old yet. He's close.
So I guess that's where I was going with the whole, like, he may not get you the passing yards and the touchdowns that you were looking for at that point. He's going to have the huge games. But if he could do what he did last year, yeah, absolutely.
There's other factors, right? Taysom Hill being there. Are they going to just keep using him even more? Is that going to steal some touchdowns from Brees? Are they going to just keep winning? This could be a team that wins, 13 games. Like, we could see this team win a lot of games this season, and maybe they're able to kind of pull off the gas a little bit with Brees. So I'm with you. There's risk, and he's not somebody that I end up with a lot, and it's normally because of, that range of guys. And most of the quarterbacks in this division are in that same range. Those older quarterbacks, they tend to go a little higher than even ADP sometimes in casual drafts. And it's just because they're names that have been around forever. And casual drafters feel comfortable grabbing a Brady and a Brees and having them on their roster, even though maybe they don't have the upside that they used to.
Yeah, it is comfort. I get it. I totally do. All right, AJ, you want to move on?
Yeah. All right. So speaking of Matt Ryan, it's another even year And is it time to draft Matt Ryan and watch him finish near the top of the quarterbacks again? If you
It's
look
like
at the stats,
The weirdest thing, right?
It's so.
It-
Because
it's
I
like
draft
the-
them on
it's-
odd years every year. I need to stop.
well, yeah, you would. You probably think you would learn after that. But
Well,
it's like
I have
watching the
now.
San Francisco Giants win, World Series every other year. Matt Ryan decides, hey, I'm going to do this and be good. I mean, he's still good regardless, but he just shines in these even years. Right up around 5,000 yards in both 2016, 2018, 35 and 38 touchdowns, 18, 16. I mean, that's ridiculous production to have. His QB rating's always been above 90 the past 4 years, which is awesome too. But I mean, he's also consistently playing. He's missed one game out of the last 4 years. I mean, what are you looking at from Ryan this year?
Here's my problem with him. Aside from what we just talked about, that he's another guy that just doesn't really put up much rushing production, and that makes it really hard for him to get really high up the year-end list. He can put up 30 touchdown passes, and that's basically what he's going to need to do. You kind of talked about it. He's done that 3 times in his career. If he can't do that, and last year he wasn't able to. Last year he had 26 touchdown passes, but he still had a great year. He threw for over 4,500 yards or nearly 4,500 yards, and he had 26 touchdowns. That's fantastic, right? Those are the kind of numbers you want from your quarterback. But guess what? He finished as the QB 10 last year. So you have a team that led the league in passing attempts and led the league dramatically in passing attempts. They were like 50 ahead of the next best team. Where's the upside going to come from? Is it going to be better efficiency? When I look at him, the only thing that I could see happening is some big touchdown total, and he's got the weapons to do it, right? And Julio and Calvin Ridley and Hayden Hurst there now. They got a lot of options. So yeah, maybe it happens for him, but I'm just not banking on him putting up this, MVP-like season on a team that is a losing team. It's a bad defense. That's going to force them to continue throwing, but I don't see where the upside is going to come from, because you can't look at more volume. So it's got to be efficiency. It's got to be touchdowns. That's his only chance. And that's not really a bet that I'm willing to make.
Yeah. What about you, Joe? You gonna take the plunge and draft him in an even year for him?
Nah, I've been going elsewhere with quarterback. It seems like I'm kind of passing up on the Brees and the Ryans and things like that this year as much as I possibly can. I mean, yeah, he's safe. Just like we just talked about with the Brees, he's safe. But yeah, it's all volume with him. And if Gurley can be anywhere close to Gurley, they didn't have a rushing game last year at all. So maybe that also probably doesn't help him either. He just gets knocked around back there too. So people just pin their noses, pin their ears back and just go, right? So, I mean, the weapons there, Julio and Ridley, they're monsters, and they got Hurst this year, so we'll see what Hurst can do, taking over for Austin Hooper. But yeah, I mean, he's 4,000 yards. You're going to get 4,000 to 5,000 yards with maybe right around 30 touchdowns. That's fine. It's going to be a safe, steady quarterback play, but you lack upside, just like Justin said. So.
Yeah.
All right, back to some Tom Brady news.
Boo.
Call me Brady. So look, they're definitely a way more interesting team. They're definitely a legit contender, as we mentioned. In fantasy football, though, like, I just don't know if I really believe in the rankings. I mean, I'm looking at Fantasy Pros, and I see his high as 4. I see his low as 22. There's such extremes with this guy. He finished QB 16 last year on a point per game basis. I mean, I think he was like 12 overall. Just, you factor in injury, so your overall doesn't really matter to me in the long run. I mean, is he really capable of putting up numbers that finishes QB 11? And like, is he a target for you?
I don't know that he's a target. He's a guy that I've ended up with if he's fallen, kind of to that, maybe just outside of that QB1 range. If he ends up going there, maybe I'll take him. Because, listen, there's a little bit of Peyton Manning to the Broncos magic here, right? That's something that could happen. He's going to a new team.
That's a good point.
The chip is on his shoulder. he seems like he was kind of upset in New England near the end. So maybe having that weight off of him and going to this new team, he seems re-energized. Everything we've seen so far, he's getting the teammates together. He's going to be fired up. We know he's a competitive guy. So the possibility is there. But once again, he's not a guy that I'm really expecting to do that. Once again, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here, but without having those rushing numbers, it's great that he's bringing Gronk with him. I think that will help. But my real concern, aside from the fact that he's obviously old as hell, and we know that the drop-off is there, because that's another thing that happened with Peyton, right? The drop-off came for him very quickly, and all of a sudden Peyton was dust and it was over. And we could see that happen for Brady. And that's not just the Bills fan in me saying this after watching him beat my team all those times over the years. It's coming. Older quarterbacks, father time is going to eventually catch up to them. But my real concern for the Bucs this year is that they're just going to be better with Brady under center. And that's an argument you can make going back to the Breeze thing too, right? When the team's really good, maybe they're not going to have as many of those game scripts where they're chasing, which is something that the Bucs had a lot with Jameis, right? Jameis goes out, he throws his picks in the first quarter. All of a sudden, they're in YOLO mode the rest of the game, and they're throwing like crazy, and they're putting up these wild numbers. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, the Vegas win total for them, it's 9.5, I believe. So this is a team that's going to win a lot more games, going to be more positive game scripts. Maybe they lean on the running game a little more, and we'll talk about them in a bit. But, they're at least trying to put together a backfield. I don't really love what they're doing, but they're trying to put together a backfield that could maybe do something. So that's my problem with Brady. I don't think the volume is going to be there for him, because in New England, as quietly as they did it, he always seemed to be in the top 10 for pass attempts when he was in New England. And I don't know. I know as much as Bruce Arians loves to throw the ball, I just don't know that they're going to need that from Brady at this point. So I don't think the volume is going to be there. And that's why I have all these guys ranked. It's hilarious that we're talking about them in this division, because I have Matt Ryan 9, I got Brady 10, and I got Breeze 11. And you could kind of shuffle them around a little bit, but they're locked in as low-end quarterback ones for me. I just don't think they're going to be much better than that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here that you just mentioned is that they're trying to not necessarily have to force him to throw the ball. And being a Philly fan, obviously I love Shady. I didn't realize that he was signed there. Also obvious from earlier, but I don't know what he brings other than experience. He's a smart player. He's not gonna blow away defenses anymore, though. He's on the downslope, obviously, too. But I think the big thing here is, with as well as Tampa Bay's defense is going to play, in theory, and with what Brady brings, he can fall more into this game manager role and still win the games. He can blow up the first half and then just go to cruise control in the second half. Let the defense take over, let the run game take over. He's not going to need to do a lot. They're not going to be throwing a ton, trying to win games at the last minute because they're behind 3 scores. So I think that definitely helps in his favor.
Here's the only thing that I will say, though, in Brady's favor, knowing his personality and comparing it to the Manning thing. I knew
you were going.
There was a little bit Peyton Manning, he wanted to put up huge numbers, right? And when they got in the red zone, he was throwing touchdowns. They weren't running the ball in. He wanted those huge touchdown totals, and he was putting up 4 or 5 touchdowns a week. It was wild. I owned him on a couple teams that year. It was fantastic for fantasy. I'm sure you guys.
He was like a first-round pick in leagues the next year. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And then he was terrible.
Could you not see Brady have that same kind of mentality, though, right? That he's like, I want to show everybody that I'm still awesome, that I can put up these big numbers, that maybe I could try to be the MVP. And just every time they're in the red zone, every time they're near the goal line, he's throwing these short passes, hitting Gronk and stuff, and they're not handing it off to any of those running backs.
Oh, 100%. I can definitely see. I mean, I will say this about Brady, and again, being an Eagles fan, I obviously don't like Brady that much. Love the fact that we were the last team to beat him in the Super Bowl, so suck it, Brady. But I mean,
how you really feel.
He is the ultimate competitor. All he wants to do is win, and he's clearly won a lot in his career. So I think that there's definitely going to be a chip on his shoulder. I definitely see him wanting to just say, screw the game plan. Guess what, Arians? This is my team now. Just go, pout on the sideline. I'm going to run things from here. Call a couple Omahas, as an homage to Mr. Manning, and score touchdowns. So I could see that, but I feel like overall they'll look at him more to be a game manager, and that's all they need him to be at this point, because the team is coming up and it's a good team. So, all right, Joe, what do we got? Let's talk about Mr. Bridgewater, the youngest quarterback here, whose age matches his ADP.
Yeah. So that's cool. I'll take this question, AJ. It's supposed to be yours, but so in
oh, never mind.
It's all good. I got it.
Teddy is not a relevant quarterback in 1 QB leagues, but in a 2 quarterback league, are you interested in him as your QB2? Or would he be more looked at as a QB3? Or do you pass altogether?
I'm actually going to go one step further than that in the positive direction. And I'm going to say I'm not so sure he won't be relevant in 1 quarterback leagues. So looking at my quarterback strategy in general, I don't normally pay up for Lamar and Mahomes. Sometimes if you get like the Watson, Dak level of guys, if they fall enough, I'll take one of them. But really, normally I aim to get my quarterback once my starting roster's filled out in the 10th round, around that range. And that's where you get right now. Josh Allen. I really like Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz this year. Carson Wentz this year briefly earlier. If he can put up quarterback, he has no receivers. Well, now we're going to give him some weapons. Now we're going to give him some healthy guys and some healthy guys. And see what he can do. And we saw him a couple of years ago have kind of MVP seasons before he got hurt.
That's what he'll do. Play for 4 games.
You think? No, he likes to get hurt at the very end of the season and miss the playoffs.
True, yeah.
He'll play during the year, and then in December he'll get hurt and crush your spirits in the fantasy playoffs.
Just let Nick Foles take it over.
But so if I don't end up taking one of those guys in that range, and at that point I'm willing to let's wait, because there are so many quarterbacks. You can make an argument this year for 24, 25 quarterbacks who could start, or at least you could stream. And at that point, I'm looking at Bridgewater. I'm looking at Gardner Minshew. I'll take those guys at the end. And if they don't work out, well, guess what? There's probably a bunch of other guys who are going to be on the waiver wire. Maybe Joe Burrow didn't get drafted. Maybe Phillip Rivers does something. Jimmy Garoppolo. There's so many quarterbacks. You can just stream with those guys. It's been proven. But maybe Minshew or Bridgewater, maybe these guys turn into potential weekly starters for you, right? And with Minshew, we're not going to get into it. I know we're talking about the NFC South, but with Minshew, underrated rushing totals. That's kind of what pushes him up a little bit. With Bridgewater, it's going to be the volume. This team is going to throw the ball so much. Last year, they were very sneaky as the second highest pass attempts in the entire league. They had 633 pass attempts. And guess what? They go out and just dismantle that defense. They bring in a bunch of rookies. They're going to be in a ton of shootout situations again. That's what's going to happen here. I think Teddy's underappreciated. I'm not making that argument whatsoever here. But he was in a good situation last year when he started those 5 games when Breeze was out. And he showed he can produce for fantasy. He was the quarterback 12 during those 5 games, during that little stretch. And he showed he can have a ceiling. He had a game where he had 314 passing yards, had 4 touchdowns against the Bucs, who is a defense we've talked about. It's a little bit better. They're not really bottom of the barrel. So he has a little bit more of a ceiling. And even if he profiles as a quarterback that is probably going to want to take more shots in the short to intermediate range of the field. Well, guess what? He's got all these yak monsters on that offense now, right? CMC and DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. You give him a field stretcher and Robbie Anderson. I don't know what their, efficiency is going to be together, but he's there to stretch defenses out a little bit. You got at least a promising young tight end in Ian Thomas. I don't know if he's really going to produce anything, but you got him there as well. And then you got these new coaches showing up. You got these offensive-minded guys, Matt Rule, Joe Brady. And Brady last year had that historic season as the OC with LSU. But also, before that, he was with the Saints when Bridgewater was there. Bridgewater already knows this offense. So in this weird offseason where you're going to have a lot of these guys that change teams, a lot of these rookies are going to be playing catch up over the next month here when they get to training camp. Yeah, the virtual meetings were great, but over the next month when they finally get on the field, they're playing catch up. Bridgewater already knows this offense. So I think that's going to help him. I think he's not somebody that's exciting by any means, but he's somebody that at the end of the year, we could look up and he could be on that fringe, that low end QB1 range as well, maybe a high end QB2, a guy who certainly could be a streamer early in the year. And then you go from there and see what happens. But somebody who's being underrated because, well, you have to pay up for the Bradys and the Ryans and all those guys. Bridgewater is completely free. You get him with your last pick and you see if it works out. And if not, like I said, you're going to stream the rest of the way. So that's a strategy that I'm totally willing to employ. And I think he's somebody that's getting overlooked completely.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how I feel about Bridgewater. I mean, I think he's talented and he showed well with the Saints in his short amount of time there. Yeah, I mean, I do think he's being underrated. I'm not really sure I'm willing to buy in on him being like a usable quarterback every week yet. He's definitely streamable. McCaffrey's there and DJ Moore. That's huge. So I love that. But it's one of those I kind of need to wait and see with him. I'm not willing to take the plunge yet.
It's hard to move him up the rankings. And once again, it just goes to how deep quarterback is, right? When you start to look at those names, who are you moving him above? It's tough to get him higher than 20 or so. But I do think he has that upside. Not top 5 upside, but top 15 upside maybe.
Yeah, I could see top 15 for sure. So, all right, let's jump over to the running backs here. Obviously, McCaffrey here at 1. Got Alvin Kamara at 4, Todd Gurley at 18, Ronald Jones at 35, Keyshawn Vaughn at 40, Latavius Murray at 45, and then we drop all the way down to some just guys. Brian Hill, 72, Ito Smith, 78, and Dari, I wanted to embarrass myself on air, Ogunabowale, 89. Did I do it?
You did it. You did it.
I have no idea. I kind of made that up. All right.
You made up his name?
I made up the pronunciation. I had no idea. I just kind of went with it. Anyway, McCaffrey, the obvious number 1 pick this year. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about here, but just wanted to ask you. I mean, I guess maybe your last answer with Teddy kind of already answered this, but just in case. I mean, any concerns with new coach, new QB, that he's not going to return the number 1 value?
I mean, concerns, I'm not too worried. No. I mean, I know the odds are against a running back being the overall RB1 in fantasy in back-to-back years. It doesn't happen that often, but there also aren't that many backs like Christian McCaffrey, right? Like 2 years ago, he goes out and sets the record for receptions by a running back with like 107. And then last year comes back, beats his own record and puts up 116 catches, I believe it was. So people who act like it's impossible to do this back-to-back thing, it's not impossible. There's guys that have done it. I mean, Emmitt Smith, Marshall Faulk, I think Priest Holmes did it. It happened a while ago, right? If you're only looking at the last 10 years, that hasn't happened recently, but it definitely can happen. And if I could put my chip on a guy who has the best chance to do it and to finish as the RB1 overall this year, it's going to be McCaffrey.
Makes total sense to me. I agree. So I don't think there's really much else to talk here with McCaffrey. He's the guy. So AJ, moving right along, man.
All right. So next we've got Mr. Kamara. So we kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. He had a bit of a down season, mostly due to the nagging injuries, but he also had a major touchdown reduction. I mean, he's still going super early in drafts. Is it right to expect a bounce back with him? Or could the touchdowns, the first 2 seasons that he had, is that more of like an outlier and now we're going to kind of settle in for what we saw last year?
No, I think we're going to see a bounce back. I mean, the touchdowns the second season were high for sure. I mean, 18 scores. Mm-hmm. That should, open the eyes of Aaron Jones owners. And they should take a look at that because he had 19 touchdowns last year. And the regression comes for you, right? You just don't expect the regression to take you to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is what happened to Kamara last year. 10 or 11 touchdowns he goes all the way down to 6 total touchdowns, which was crazy. He had like that 9-game stretch where he didn't even find the end zone at all. Like nobody saw any of that coming. And sure, some of it was because the injury, like you got to factor all of that in. The touchdown regression, it burned him last year, but now I think it's going to go the other way. I think this year it's actually going to help him a little bit, right? Through the first 6 games last year, that's when he suffered that, I think it was a high ankle sprain, right? Through the first 6 games, you look at his on-pace stats, he was on pace for over 300 touches. And last year, at the end of the season, there was 9 backs that had at least 300 touches last year, and only 2 of them had less than 8 touchdowns, and both those guys were on losing teams. Well, Kamara's not going to be on a losing team this year. I think we can feel pretty confident saying that. The Saints are going to win a bunch of games. We've already mentioned that. So I think that's important. We had Dr. Edmund Porras. He's an injury analyst over at Fantasy Points. We had him on our podcast a month or so ago. And he pointed out that in the first 6 weeks before that Kamara injury, he was second best in tackles forced per touch. And then after the injury, he fell to 39th. So there was a big difference in his production, his efficiency there. The injury, he was just grinding it out the rest of the way, right? So I actually love Kamara in the range there. And like the 4th or 5th pick overall, I'm willing to take him. It's basically him and Dalvin Cook right there. And you just make your decision between the two of them.
All right. Anything on Kamara, Joe?
No, I like him. I mean, again, I agree with Jetson. I don't think 8, I'm looking in like the 10, 12, range type of thing. Even 14 might be slightly high, but he's going to be good as long as he's healthy. So, Todd Gurley over in Atlanta, given a second chance. I mean, running back 18 for a guy who just a couple years ago was like the top dog for running backs, and everybody wanted this guy, even Dynasty, like just number 1 guy, 100%. But even at RB18, I mean, like, are the knee issues enough for you to avoid him at that cost?
It depends on your roster build. I'd still be willing to take him. You just have to know what you're getting now, right? And the days of Gurley being that top 5 back and maybe being the RB1 overall, that ain't happening anymore, right? You could see it last year. The explosiveness is gone a little bit. The knee issue, it's a problem. And he was still able to produce last year, mostly because the way the Rams were using him. They were giving him all these goal line touches. They were giving him a ton of volume. Now, the passing numbers came down a little bit, but he was still getting a lot of carries and a lot of scoring opportunities. And that kept him in that RB2 range. Now he's going to another team where it kind of seems like he's set up the same way, right? Like you have another team that's pretty decent offense here, one of the better offenses, I would say, in the league. A team that has pretty much no competition in that running back room. Nope. There was like I saw Mike Clay retweet something where recently where it was like some of the players thought that Brian Hill should have got a chance to be the starter if they didn't sign a free agent. Brian Hill had his chance last year and he's kind of fumbled it away, right? Like, right. I don't know that Brian Hill's ever going to be the answer. If I had to put my chip on one of the backups there, if Gurley does go down, I guess it would be Hill, but it's probably going to turn into some sort of committee if Gurley gets injured or, hopefully, but if he gets a COVID situation or he misses time or anything, it would probably turn into some sort of a committee there. So I think he's going to a team that's going to have a better line than the Rams had. I mean, they got the young guys on the right side, Chris Lidstrom, Caleb McGarry. They're going into their second year. You think the line's going to be a little better. So I don't know if as long as you understand that he is a volume dependent guy at this point, that he doesn't have that upside, he can give you those RB2 numbers, maybe not too much more than that, then yeah, I'm okay with taking him. But he's just one of these guys that's just not exciting. If you're looking for a fun player that you want to watch every week, I don't think Gurley's going to be that guy.
No, there's a lot of guys like right around where he sits and he's kind of floating around the draft. I'm almost like, I'd rather have this guy. And I click on the other guy instead. I just kind of like Gurley fall.
I don't blame you at all.
I mean, if he were to fall into like running back 22, 24, something like that, like, all right, fine, I'll do it. But he's not. Even though I've got him ranked up there where he's going, it's just, I don't really want him. Like you just said, it's just kind of blah. Fantasy football needs to be fun too. Besides just, I get winning's fun, but I like enjoying watching the players I draft too. I get it. So
Yeah. All right. So dipping back into Tampa Bay here. So the running back situation has been a pretty heated debate throughout the offseason here. Obviously, you've got people that are on Team Rojo and then the anti-Rojos who like Keyshawn Vaughn. Whose side are you on and why?
Well, now it's a whole
Now
different
it's shady,
situation,
yeah.
right? Now
Exactly.
you got
I know.
LaShawn
I'm
McCoy
reading
there
this.
as
I'm
well.
like, why?
This was written 3 days ago. Sorry.
Well, you could tell by my rankings. Like I have them pretty far down. I was shying away from them even before they brought Shady in. And make no mistake, Shady is washed. Shady had a great opportunity last year with the Chiefs, and he didn't really produce very much. So it's nice that he's going to go to the Bucks, and they're going to have all this fanfare because Brady and Gronk and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think that Shady's going to be the guy. I don't think he's somebody you want to get in fantasy. I think this is going to turn into a really big nightmare and sort of a committee there. Rojo, Keyshawn Vaughn, they're decent. I mean, the thing about those guys is they're not really spectacular in any part of their game, right? So I get the feeling why the coaching staff, why the front office wants to bring in somebody else. I mean, let's face it, Brady's probably calling the shots there right now, and he's saying, I need a veteran that I can trust, and let's go get him. I just think it's a big no thank you for me. I don't want anybody in this backfield. I don't want to have to deal with it. You're going to have all these guys probably involved. You're going to have maybe Dario Gunbowale, like you said, even involved on some passing downs. It wouldn't shock me at all. And we've seen this happen a few times, right? Remember when Adrian Peterson went to the Saints and it didn't really work out for him, and he was he was gone. It wouldn't shock me at all if we see something like that happen here with McCoy, and he doesn't even make the team for week 1, despite the fact that everybody seems very excited about him today. People overreact on Twitter. It's just silly. Just stay away from this backfield entirely. Because also, go back to what we mentioned earlier. Maybe Brady's just going to throw for all these touchdowns, and they're not even going to put up a big rushing touchdown total on the year.
Kind of why I like Dari Ogunbowale. Yep, mess that one up.
I like the hesitation before you say it.
Yes,
time.
I have to think about yourself
it. Up, yeah.
Ogunbowale.
Anyway,
God bless you,
Dario. That's kind of why I like him. I feel like he could play like that James White role a little bit.
Possibly, yeah.
I mean, it's huge. I mean, sure, James White didn't have a ton of great games, not every week, but he has some pretty monster games, enough that he was a flex play, more often than not. So I like it. Yeah, I'm definitely off this backfield. I just wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't know where they were headed. So, all right, let's move in here with some wide receivers. Again, another number 1 spot here. Michael Thomas at 1, Julio Jones 5, Chris Godwin 6, Mike Evans 8, DJ Moore 15, Calvin Ridley 17. Ooh, boy, that's a lot of good receivers. Dropping down, though, Emmanuel Sanders at 41, Robbie Anderson at 51, and then Curtis Samuel at 58. I'm sure there's more. I stopped. This is a lot of receivers already. So, start here right off the top, man. Michael Thomas, record-breaking 2019, 149 catches, 185 targets, both insane numbers. Nobody's expecting that to happen again. That's just, obviously record-breaking, just not repeatable in my opinion. He's still the safest receiver out of this entire group. Like, not just the NFC South guys, but like in all of football, right? Number 1 receiver target, hands.
No, I've moved recently. I moved Devontae Adams above him. Now, here's the thing. Right. Here's why. Last year, Thomas was set up perfectly, right? They didn't really have another receiver that you thought was going to get big volume. He was going to get all these targets, and guess what? That's what happened. This year now, with Emmanuel Sanders being there, it actually gives him a legit number 2, right? So now I don't know. Thomas is still going to get a ton of volume. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to argue that whatsoever. But I kind of think Adams is set up the way Thomas was last year, right? He's the guy now that doesn't really have a number 2 in that offense. He's the guy now that I think is going to lead the league in targets. And he's the one that, might have something similar to that Thomas season last year. I don't know if he's going to
I wonder if there's a little bit to that. Rodgers and the Green Bay offense now, the way it's set up, plays a little more conservative. They like to run the ball a lot, and for good reason. They got Aaron Jones. This year they brought in A.J. Dillon to kind of be a little more short yardage guy. They still had Williams there. that's their game plan, and trying to rely on the defense a little bit more. I wonder if that's what's gonna make Adams not get as many targets as you would think.
It's possible, but also the thing with him, I mean, I think we would both agree these two guys are going to get a ton of targets,
Absolutely.
right? These two guys are going to get a ton of targets. The other thing with Adams too is we've seen him put up really big touchdown totals. Like he can deliver that part of the game as well. So they're neck and neck. Like that's why it's funny. Right?
I know it's nitpicking.
When people look at your rankings, like I'm sure you get the same thing where people go, "Why do you have this guy 7 and this guy 10?" Right? It's like, well, actually, when you look at their projections, it's really close, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's like 4 points, guys.
Yeah, like 3 spots is not that big of a difference. So it's the same thing. These two guys, I have them in the same range. I would take both of them in the middle of the first round, and I'd be happy to have either on my team. The thing with roster builds, I probably want to go running back in the first round normally, but I am willing to do that if I feel like I can get, a Josh Jacobs or somebody in the second round. And then I can still have that running back early and feel pretty confident there. So these guys are both great. If you want to make an argument that Thomas is number 1 this year, I had him number 1 most of the offseason, so I'm not going to stop you there whatsoever. And I think they're the clear top 2, but I moved Adams up because I do think he's going to get a lot of targets because I don't have a lot of faith in Allen Lazard or anybody else in that Green Bay passing game.
Jay Sternberger? No,
no, not going to do it for me.
Nah, I nitpick it. I always ask those
not him
questions just to get some conversation going. So I do agree with you though. I do have Thomas 1, but again, it's kind of flip of the coin. Honestly, that they're both right there. So, all right, moving on.
Right. So a former number 1 guy, Mr. Julio Jones. I mean, dude still just churns out productive season after productive season after productive season. But there's some talk now that Calvin Ridley is going to overtake Julio this year, or at the very least improve enough to make Julio not worth this top pick. Which side are you on the Atlanta?
No, I mean, Julio's 31. Okay, fine. Injuries are possible. Like I was talking about earlier, the COVID IR stretch, all that stuff's possible. If he stays healthy, though, I'm taking Julio all the way. Like I have him ranked number 3, right behind those last 2 guys that we talked about. The guy has pretty much, last year he fell just short by 6 yards. He pretty much has 1,400 yards, 6 straight seasons here, right? He had 1,394. He's got at least 83 receptions in all of those years. He's been above 148 targets each of the last 3 seasons. Like, let's not overthink this here. Calvin Ridley's a great player. He's going to have some big spike games. I think he's going to have a good season as well. We saw him come on after Mo Sanu left last year. It was a brief stretch before he got hurt, but Ridley had some really good production during that stretch. He's going to have a good season. He's going to be a wide receiver too. But Julio Jones, he's the closest thing we have to Calvin Johnson at this point. The guy's phenomenal. Don't overthink it. He probably should be a first-round pick. If you can get him in the second round, like now we're talking again about roster builds, you get one of those solid running backs in the first round. You come back around and get Julio. Great start. That's a great start to your drafts.
Yeah, I agree. Joe?
Yeah, Julio Jones is super safe. We wish we got the touchdowns out of him. Unfortunately, they're just not, the high numbers aren't going to be there. He's going to score 5, 6, maybe 7, 8 at best. That's just what it is. I do like Calvin Ridley a lot this year, though. I am a huge Calvin Ridley believer. You mentioned it, and we were talking a little bit before the show about how well he played in those first few games after Sanu left. And then, unfortunately, he got hurt. I mean, he was I think he was wide receiver 2 for those first few weeks, right behind Michael Thomas, of course. Of course, it was still 2 points per game average behind Michael Thomas because Michael Thomas was just a machine last year. But yeah, I mean, Ridley almost carried me to a dynasty championship in a league I have not won many times, but then he got hurt. And of course, that's what happens to me 3 times now. I've lost Wentz 1 year. Last year was Ridley right before the playoffs, and I did not win either one of those years. Those should have been it. But my pity party aside, Ridley, I'm a big fan of his this year. So go ahead and draft him, guys. Go target him early. So moving on here, back over to those Tampa Bay Bucks. Godwin and Evans, man. Whew. They finished wide receiver 2 and 3 in points per game. Now, obviously, the late season injuries just crushed fantasy owners last year. Nothing you can do about it, guys. It sucks. I feel you, man. That was with Winston under center. I mean, and we know that Winston just gunslinger, just going to chuck it down the field, let his guys go make plays. He didn't care about the interceptions. I mean, 30-30 guy, right? Got to make history, whatever way you can. I mean, is Tom Brady, we've mentioned how he might just be kind of a little bit more of a game manager. Can he keep their value up doing that?
I mean, do you blame Brady, though, if it's a volume thing? Like, I think it goes back to that. I don't know if that's Brady's fault. I don't know if it's going to be because Brady's declining or anything like that. I just think it goes back to the volume and the fact that Gronk's there now. Yeah. And Gronk and him have that connection. And even if Gronk doesn't put up big yardage, I think there's a good chance that Gronk puts up a decent touchdown total. So that's going to hurt those guys, right? I think they had 8 and 9 touchdowns between them, something like that last year. So, and I think that the tight ends overall last year in Tampa, it wasn't a high total. It was like 5 or 6 touchdowns between all of them. So I think Gronk's going to outdo that, plus whatever, if Bray plays, whatever, OJ Howard adds to that, we could see the tight ends put up a bigger touchdown total overall between them this year, and that's going to take away from those guys and overall volume and lower targets. I don't blame Brady for that. I just, I look at the fact that the team's going to be successful and they're not going to need to be in those, comeback situations all the time. And unfortunately, as much as you hate to see a team losing, those fourth quarter situations when you're in comeback mode, they can be pretty good for fantasy. And I don't know they're going to be in those situations as much this year.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, I don't have my rankings pulled up right now. I probably should have for the show, but I didn't. I mean, Godwin and Evans at 6 and 8. I mean, I get why they are there, but I feel like they shouldn't be. Like, I've been avoiding. Like, I let them pass me. Honestly, I feel like they're kind of risky at that point.
Yeah, I have Godwin still in my top 10, but I have Evans now in like my top 15. Depends on the scoring format, but he's in my top 15. That's a little lower than I think you would have expected him to be, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that's weird, it goes back to what we were talking about a second ago of like, once you get past the first 4 or 5 receivers, like wide receiver 6 to wide receiver 17 is like one of the toughest stretches for me to rank this year. Like when you're doing the projections, I'm probably going to shuffle that group up 20 times before the season starts because all those guys are so close. You're just kind of, splitting them by hairs right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I haven't updated my rankings in a few weeks, but I've got Godwin 7 and Evans 9, so I'm kind of right there with them. But I kind of feel like I want to slide them down ever so slightly, just because I get a bad feeling about the volume, again, you've mentioned, of this passing offense and just how it's going to affect these 2 monster receivers. So they're good. They're going to have monster games, but maybe the consistency won't be there as much as we hope. So.
All right. So moving on to the Panthers, we got Mr. DJ Moore. So he finished as a wide receiver 18 overall last year, 19th in points per game. He's being drafted way better than that, though. I mean, do you think Teddy is going to help take his game, like, to match that draft cost? Or is he still kind of being drafted?
Well, I mean, you know that I love this situation, right? After how I talked about Teddy earlier.
Yep.
I mean, okay, let's go back to Moore's rookie season. So he puts up 55 catches, 788 yards. So good numbers, right? And Cam Newton was playing most of that year. It's not bad at all. Then he loses Newton very early last season, and he ends up with this backup level quarterback in Kyle Allen. I'm sorry, Kyle Allen, but he's not an NFL starter, right? We saw it last year. Poor Curtis Samuel, he couldn't throw the ball anywhere near him downfield. Kyle Allen is not a good quarterback. He is a backup level guy at the NFL. And still, despite all of that, DJ Moore puts up 87 catches and 1,175 yards. Like, when you look back at those numbers, it's almost stunning that he was able to do that with the quarterback play that they had there. And now you bring in Teddy Bridgewater, who, if you want to compare him to Kyle Allen, I'm even okay with that, right? Teddy, like I said earlier, he's not an elite quarterback, but he is much better than Kyle Allen. He's going to be way more efficient than Kyle Allen. He's going to do a lot of the same things. He's going to want to stick in that short to intermediate range, but that's fine for DJ Moore, right? That's great. Let's give DJ Moore that ball and let's see what he can do after the catch, because the guy is just phenomenal in that area with it. And there's a ton of stats you can look at here. I mean, he's now compiled the ninth most receiving yards in NFL history before the age of 23. That puts him in phenomenal company. Andrew Erickson of PFF, he tweeted that of all NFL players in their first 2 seasons that have accumulated at least 140 receptions and 1,900 receiving yards, no player has scored fewer touchdowns than DJ Moore with 6 touchdowns. And that is the only thing holding him back. That might be the only thing that doesn't propel him right now into like my top 5 in my rankings, honestly, is the fact that he hasn't proven that he can score touchdowns. But we know touchdowns can be a really, really fluky thing, right?
Yes.
From year to year. And when you talk about a guy like that, he's putting up the yardage, he's putting up the catches, normally the touchdowns eventually come there. So regression is totally going to come for him. And I think Teddy's going to help him. We talked about the coaching staff. I think just in general, that offense is going to start to get a little better here. I love Moore this year. And I think this time next year, we're going to be talking about him as a top 5 guy in fantasy.
Yeah, I actually had 2 guys that fell out of my top 10 as I moved on with my rankings, but my initial list back in April, I had both him and Cortland Sutton in my top 10, and then like reevaluated some things and dropped them out, but they're still up there. But yeah, I agree. DJ Moore is just a playmaker. It's just a matter of you want to look at guys that might be able to score some more touchdowns when you're kind of looking at all the guys that can kind of be the same. He hasn't done it yet, so that's why he drops a little bit. In my opinion, there's other guys above him that have hit the touchdowns and have got just as many yards, maybe more catches too. So that you got to factor that in. So
it might be like the Julio thing, right? Where we might never see him put up a 10 touchdown season. But even if he gets up to 6 or 8 touchdowns, that would be enough to move him up the rankings, right? And have him finish even higher.
I agree. All right, well, let's move on here. Last topic, last position, tight ends. Got Cook at 9, Gronk at 11, Hayden Hurst at 14, and then O.J. Howard at 24, and then Ian Thomas at 26. Start off here with Jared Cook, and touchdown dependent type of player last season. Kind of been that way the last couple seasons. Very efficient with all of that. I mean, are we banking on him, repeating that sort of efficiency to even return a tight end 9?
I mean, he could finish around that range, if he puts up a half decent touchdown total. But the reason we were targeting him last year is because he was kind of that de facto number 2 pass catching weapon, maybe number 3 if you want to include Kamara, but maybe the number 2 downfield pass catching weapon in that offense. But now that they bring in Emmanuel Sanders, you can't feel as confident about it. So now he's going to be even more touchdown dependent. Yeah. And we know with tight ends, if they put up an okay touchdown total, they're going to probably crack the top 10, right? It's that kind of position. But I don't know that I want to bet on Cook doing that with, a healthy Kamara there, with Emmanuel Sanders there, and then obviously Michael Thomas. I'm going to look elsewhere in a year where there are so many deep tight ends to look at. There are so many breakout candidates that you can get in the later rounds. I'm probably going to err in favor of those guys.
I agree. I only grabbed Cook and Scott Fishbowl because he actually went after my other target, who I took ahead of him, who's ranked behind him, but not in my rankings. But I just was like, we'll talk about him in a minute. Not to give him away, but I was like, he just kept falling, and I was like, well, fine, I'll take him with my tight end 2 and Scott Fishbowl. It's still tight end premium. I'll do it.
Might as well.
Yeah.
All right. So we've touched on this a little bit earlier as well. We've got the return of Gronk. So he's now back with his buddy Brady. I mean, are you fading Gronk, or with the year off and the injury history, or is he just, rejuvenated because of all that?
I don't know that we have that answer, right? Like, what did the year off do for him? Because the last time we saw him, the numbers weren't great. Everybody remembers that. Did the year off really help him? We're going to see. What I think is going to happen, and we've kind of alluded to it the whole time here. I don't think he's going to put up a big yardage total when you're playing with guys like Chris Godwin, like Mike Evans. I think you're just looking at him to put up a big touchdown total. And I do think he can still do that. So it's going to depend on his ADP. He's a big name, and we kind of mentioned this with the quarterbacks, right? When these guys are these well-known names, sometimes in casual leagues, they go off the board much, much higher than maybe they should, even higher than ADP at times. And if that's the case, no thank you. No thank you whatsoever. And I will wait on one of those late round guys. But going back to Scott Fishbowl, I got Gronk as the tight end 16. Wow. I was stunned. He wasn't somebody I was targeting whatsoever, but that's a tight end premium league. To get him as the tight end 16, I was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. And my whole strategy with tight end in Scott Fishbowl was, if I don't get one of the top guys, I am just going to wait and wait and wait, and 100%. Then try to stack some guys together. And when I saw Gronk there at tight end 16, it was like, that's probably too good to be true. Even if it doesn't turn out well, the price that I paid for him, I'll be fine. I'll be able to get over it. So that would be my recommendation. If you get him sort of a little lower than ADP, I'm fine with it. But, you're really taking a chance that he has to put up that big touchdown total in order to be a real weekly star in your lineup.
The best part about Gronk was the New Year's thing that he did with Steve Harvey. It was...
Was it a Lego?
It
Lego
was
thing
just
that he smashed?
absurd. He smashed like a bust of Steve Harvey. I think it was like cake or something that was made, and they brought this thing out and sang to Steve Harvey or did something. I don't remember, but then he just took this thing and spikes it, and Harvey's just looking at him like, what? Fuck's wrong with you?
He looked at him like he was from another planet.
What are you doing?
Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
You were talking about Gronk being tight end 14, and I mentioned that to Cook. Cook was tight end 14 in my league. So I was like, I mean, at that point, again, you didn't want Gronk. I didn't really want Cook, but tight end 14, okay.
Yeah, you take him there for sure.
Round 11. Yeah. I mean,
that's
insane.
Solid value.
Okay, fine, thanks. All right. Off to my guy, tight end 10 in Scott Fishbowl, which I still have him ranked a little higher than that even. Hayden Hurst gets to take over for Austin Hooper, who was tight end number 1 after the first 10 weeks of the NFL season last year. Injury slowed him down. I just feel like Hurst is super undervalued. Not that I want to give it away for anybody who's in my leagues. I hope you're not listening, because I want him all day. I mean, this guy has got to be better than tight end 14, right?
I don't know where you're getting him tight end 14 though. Like
that's his ADP on Fantasy Pros, man.
Wow, that's crazy. That must be a little outdated. Like when I look at like best ball 10s kind of thing, I think in July his July ADP is like tight end 9. Like the hype, it's definitely caught up to him. Like he's up in that range. But I'm with you. I still think he can do better than tight end 9. I would still probably take him in that range. Now you're taking a chance. You're betting that he can move into this situation and give you what Austin Hooper gave you last season there. And yeah, there's a little bit of risk there, but there's some reasons that he didn't succeed in Baltimore, right? You're talking about a first round talent. That's where they took him. Everybody talks about it. He went before Lamar Jackson, all that sort of stuff, right? Then he gets banged up in that first offseason as a rookie. And then he injures his foot. I think he fractured it. And now he misses time. And he gets passed in the depth chart by Mark Andrews. And yeah, it turns out Mark Andrews is also a very good tight end in the league. And guess what? Hayden Hurst is not going to take that job again. So this is like the best thing that could have possibly happened to him, because when you look at, even though he wasn't playing like starting snaps last year, PFF had him ranked as the 12th best tight end in their grades. So you gotta look at something like that, right? Like that's telling you that this player has some talent. The athleticism is there. We know that. You can look at his metrics. All of that is there. So now you put this guy in this situation where Austin Hooper produced last year. It was unbelievable. 97 targets, and he only played 13 games.
Yeah, the volume for the tight end in the Atlanta offense has been there for years.
Yeah.
And Austin Hooper just showed it recently even. So I love it.
You're completely buying into the fact that I think he's a better athlete than Austin Hooper. I think he's better after the catch than Austin Hooper. And even if he only gets 75% of those targets that Austin Hooper got last season, that still puts him in the top 12 among tight ends. Like, it's that
Probably
simple.
Top 5.
Like, Dirk Cutter always wants to feature the tight end. It's just an environment where Hooper went off. You have, I mean, we've already talked about them, Julio, Calvin Ridley. They're going to draw so much attention that's why Hooper was getting all those catches underneath. Now Hayden Hurst is going to get those catches. I think he's going to thrive in this offense, and I think he has top 5 upside this year because that's what we saw Austin Hooper last year. I think it was through week 10, before he got hurt.
Yep.
There was a stretch where he was the tight end 1 last season.
Yeah. No, I'll say this: I was so lucky. I waited on tight end in Scott Fishbowl. He somehow fell to me at the 8-10. I took a huge chance to not just snatch him when I wanted to, and I was like, please, please, please let him come back to me. And he totally did. And I was just like, oh man, I'm set. I am so happy now. Like, my team gets this tank and I'm good. Like, I'd be happy with my draft at this point. So
yeah, I ended up getting Hurst in Fishbowl after a brutal run that started with 4 picks away from me. Tight ends just sat in my league for whatever reason. I grabbed Ingram as T6 at the 6-11. And then finally they started moving in the 9th round. So come to the 10th round and you get Jonnu Smith goes. Then you got Gesicki, who I was targeting. Then you get Cook at tight end 14. And then it's my turn, and I took Hurst as tight end 15. So I'm loving it. I think he's going to definitely excel. He's big and he's fast. Like, when he gets in open space, he's gone. Like, you're not catching this dude. And if you do catch him, he's going to be hard to take down. So love the pick. Love.
You guys see that random video where he like had the barbell above his head and he like got up one-handed? He had it above his head, one-handed, and he was laying flat on the ground, and he like gets up, like, without using the other hand to like prop himself up. It's insane.
He's ridiculous.
I'm sure you could just like find it on Twitter somewhere. It's all over the place. I saw it, was like, this dude is a machine.
He is. He absolutely is. And I mean, he was drafted very high too. So, Baltimore saw what he could bring, and then they decided Andrews was their guy. So Atlanta's like, okay, we'll take that. Thanks.
The only thing worth mentioning is he's a little bit older. He's on the older side. So in Dynasty, he doesn't have maybe as much value. That's the only thing, though, but this year he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see how old he actually was. But all right, AJ, let's finish this up with the last question.
Ian Thomas. So it feels like he's being a little bit disrespected in the ADP here, given the departure of Greg Olsen. Do you agree with that? And
yeah, I do kind of agree with it. I think he's all right. Like, we saw, he didn't really look great in limited opportunities last year. 2 years ago, he looked a little bit better, and I think that's where the hope kind of comes from. But with all those late round guys and all the late round tight ends you could look at, and then all the mouths to feed in Carolina, we've talked about them already. I don't know. He's going to be what, the 4th or 5th option in that passing game. Even though I think they're going to throw so much, I don't know if I'm that excited about that. I think I would rather have guys that are going after him in ADP, like Chris Herndon, Eric Ebron, even Irv Smith. I think I would take all of those guys over Ian Thomas right now.
It's a tough one with those guys. Like, it's not somebody I'm looking to go after. It's just, even in like double tight end leagues or tight end premium leagues, it's just kind of one of those like, There's been games where like you think he's gonna bust out because Olsen's been hurt a lot and he just doesn't. So I'm just kind of like, all right, fine. So I'm kind of over him. I want to see him prove it a little bit. So maybe that's why the ADP is low. Maybe a lot of people agree with that as well. So I don't know. AJ, do you got it? Any different feelings on Ian Thomas?
No, I mean, I I like him, but I agree. There's way too much going on there. I mean, if you had to choose though, receiver wise, you like Robbie Anderson or Curtis Samuel to take over more as the number 2 guy?
I love that question. I would take Curtis Samuel because even going back to just today, Matt Rule spoke and talked about the opportunity that Curtis Samuel had. And he kind of mentioned the fact that the quarterback didn't do him any favors last year and that they're going to put him in a position to succeed where he's a guy that you shouldn't just be running him down the field. You should be getting him the ball in that short to intermediate range. And it sounds like that's what they're going to do. Samuel's a guy who could even, he could take some handoffs in the backfield. He's really versatile. And it seems like they're going to use him that way. So that's kind of exciting. And Robbie Anderson, I like the talent, but I just don't think he meshes very well with Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy's, some people say, he's a little bit better of a deep ball thrower, but I don't know that you're going to see enough volume for Robbie Anderson. I think he's just going to be there to stretch the field and keep defenses honest. So I'm worried about him. I didn't love the landing spot for him when he went to Carolina. Helps the offense as a whole, but doesn't help him for fantasy.
Even though he is a Temple boy.
That background with him. Yeah. We'll see. It's possible. But I don't think the volume is going to be there for him to put up big enough stats to be a fantasy starter.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, he could get game planned into a few games, but I don't think it's going to be enough. It's going to be more McCaffrey, and I agree. I think Samuels is the number 3 there. So, all right, man. Justin, thank you for coming on. That's all we got. Before we let you go, though, remind everybody where they can find you on Twitter and all that kind of good stuff, and what you got in store for the score.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. Where you can find my stuff on Twitter at Justin Boone, and then everything. Just download the Score app. It is free. Our draft kit's on there. It's free. It's got my rankings, got all kinds of content. We're updating it daily all the way until week 1. That's really all. The Score Fantasy Football podcast. We're ramping up the episodes now. We're going to do 2-3 episodes a week. That's everything. And if you got questions, like I said, hit me up on Twitter. I love engaging with everybody on Twitter. It's really fun. And once again, appreciate you guys having me on, and always love competing with you, Joe, in the Fantasy Pros contest. I'm
coming for you.
I'm going to go toe to toe again this year.
Yeah, sounds good, man. You got that big number 1 trophy behind you. I couldn't fit my number 5 behind me, unfortunately. So it's good stuff, though, man. We'll have another good battle this year with Jake Shealy's and the John Paulsons and the Sean Kerners and stuff like that. So it's all good.
Can't wait.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man.
All right. Have a good night, man.
Take care, guys.
All right. See you.
All right, AJ. That's all I've got. Yeah, not much else, man. It's I'm watching Dylan Bundy apparently implode in LA. Apparently, I don't know. I got a tweet something about he sucked in the first inning, and I was like, oh, good. He's definitely he's allowed 4 run or no, that's not him. Where'd he go? 3 runs. Oh, he settled down. He had a bad first inning, but he settled down. So I don't know if he's still out there, but he pulled a Bundy in the first inning. So
great.
I
don't even know if I started him today. I have no idea.
FBI and Razball and stuff like that. So it's all good. But anyway, that's all I've got. Next week we are finishing up our I want to say position previews. That's what we used to do. Division previews. NFC West. So Rams and all them. So should be a fun show. Who's our guest next week? I've totally blanked on who our guest is next week, and I don't have it up. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, come on. Computer, work with me. Where'd it go? Next week, our guest is Jeff Lambert. All right, good times. He's a fun one. So looking forward to that. I've been on his podcast before, and he's a good guy. So we will be doing that, finish up our division previews, and then jumping into some other talk here after that. Consistency, we'll do a live mock draft and some rankings review up until the season starts. So make sure you check out fantasy6pack.net, like us and follow us on whatever you listen to, Periscope, YouTube, iTunes, you name it. So go ahead and do that. We appreciate the support. Have a good night, everyone.
See ya.